Hey guys, TomBoss21 here. In today's video, I'm going to show you a straightforward workflow that you can use to study any final table spot. Joining us will be Samuel Mullur, our latest GTO Wizard Team Pro, who's going to give his thoughts on two hands he's played on the recent GG Millions final table. Let's dive right in. Samuel Mullur is a young, high-stakes MTT prodigy. He's racked up over $5.7 million in career earnings before the age of 25, and now he's officially a GTO Wizard Team Pro. He's playing at the highest stakes in the toughest games and still dominating, and I have no doubt in my mind that he has a legendary career ahead of him. So I'm very excited to introduce you to him today and get his thoughts on a couple tough hands he's played.
Hey team, Tombos reached out and asked if I could share a couple thoughts on two very interesting hands I played on the recent 10K GG Millions main event final table. So yeah, let's jump right into it. The first one is with 7 players left, I find myself in the cutoff first in, where there's, maybe quickly about the distribution, there's like 2 short-ish stacks, one down 18 bigs and one on 28. And I'm cut off first in with 41 bigs, and I'm racing into 3 covering stacks. So Linus is on the button with 48. There's the chip leader in the small blind with like 80. And then there's Ognian Dimov in the big blind with the same stack as I have, roughly, covering me slightly. So a distribution where I'm going to have risk premium, significant risk premium against all 3 parties. And so I'm not going to be very wide first in. And I ended up 2.2x open raising ace-jack off in that situation. And Linus from, again, 48 big blinds calls the button. So
You'll notice the very first thing Sam talks about are the stack distributions. And this is important because at a final table, the stack distribution tells you how much ICM pressure you're going to face. Who's ahead of me? Who covers me? Where am I relative to the rest of the table in terms of my stack? These are all like really important decisions when it comes to how wide you should open or how wide you should play in general. So the first thing we need to do is hunt down a final table stack distribution that roughly matches what was going on in Sam's game. To do that, I'm going to start by clicking MTT and then ICM. And these solutions are under the 200 player category. I'll make sure I've selected final table. And in this case, there were 7 players remaining. Okay, now you can see here I've already applied some filters, but just to show you how I would get there, I'm going to clear those. What we're going to do is show filters. Now, in game, the average stack was 43 big blinds. So I'm just going to give a range of, let's say, 40 to 45 big blinds. Sam's stack was 42 big blinds. So I'm going to do the same thing. Let's say, I don't know, 38 to 46. Just give like a range. The button covers, so we'll go like 45 to 55. Small blind had a huge stack, so they had 77 in game. So I'm going to put that down to like some big covering stack. And the big blind also covers, so the big blind will go, let's say at least 45. I would go a little bit less. Okay, so now we've got like 4 different scenarios here. Each of them is pretty reasonable. I think this top one is going to be pretty good because we can see that the average stack in game was 42. Here it's 45. Sam's stack in game was 42. Here it's 41. And Sam was covered by all 3 players. So I think this particular solution is going to be a pretty good match to what was going on in terms of ICM pressure. Right? And you can see, like, just by going over these filters, it's really easy to find a solution that matches what was happening in game and quickly starts studying these final table spots. So Sam rightly notes that because he's covered by all 3 players behind him, his risk premium, and you can access that by clicking this button, is quite high. So Sam's in the cutoff here, and it's folded to him, so he's got to be worried about button, small blind, and big blind. And you can see that his risk premium is upwards of 16-17% against all 3 of these players. Because of that, we can see that the GTO solution actually opens very tight, and Sam knows this, so he was also opening tight in-game. Now here, Linus on the button, one of the best players in the world, cold calls, and you can see that the cold calling range here is actually pretty tight. And part of the reason for this is that the blinds cover, or at least the small blind covered in game. So that's going to kind of like shrink how many hands the button can defend with. And of course, both the blinds fold, and we'll take a flop. Here you can see that it's automatically pulled in all of the different stacks. like this payout is from the 200 player solutions, but I'm actually just going to go ahead and edit this so that it's the same as the GG Millions final table. All right, so I've edited the payout structure so that it's the same as it was on the GG Millions final table. So up top, they're playing for about 1.3 million, 1.4 mil, and down below, they're playing for about 300K. So pretty steep pay jumps. I've also gone ahead and added both Sam's and Linus's stacks, as well as every other stack at the table. Now, before we dive into this, I'm going to take you back to Sam Mullur to see how this hand played out.
We go to a flop of Jack 9-6 two-tone, and the 9 and the 6 being the same suit. And with me thinking I have like 14 to 15% risk premium here, in general, like cutoff button, I'm not going to do much betting anyway. I think for chips, the global frequency is like 20% or something, maybe even slightly less. I'm not 100% sure. So not much betting in these situations in general. And with the added risk premium, I want to do a lot of checking. This board is no exception. So I ended up range checking this spot. I think even if there might be like 3% betting or something in theory, range checking is a viable play. So that's what I did. And Linus bets 30% of the pot. The sizing, which I'm not surprised to see. And against that, compared to most situations that we find ourselves in on the final table, we do need more equity in general. And therefore, in a lot of these spots with high risk premiums, and therefore the value thresholds heavily increase. So I think a hand like Ace Jack here, where it's also board structure where there's going to be a lot of equity shifts on future streets. I do not want to start bloating a huge pot out of position. So I think in case I do want to raise a hand like Ace Jack, I do need additional equity, and even that hand can't raise all the time. So yeah, I ended up pure calling my comboing game, and the turn brought the front door flush on a 5. So it's Jack 9-6 5, the 9-6 and the 5 being spades, and the turn goes check check. The river is offsuit queen, and now the question becomes like, how much equity does my hand have against this range? Is my hand good enough to value bet? I in game thought that population, here again it's Linus, so but in game I thought population might have slightly less queen X in their river arriving range compared to what it's supposed to, because I think a lot of the queen X combos are quite nice turn barrels as well. So having that in mind, I thought that my hand might be good enough to bet. Also, Linus and I played some hands in the past where I felt like I got called pretty loose, which like not like super loose, but still like hands where I expected at least a significant amount of folding from here and there. So yeah, anyway, I thought that Linus leans a little bit call happy, and it's also a line where I don't expect to get bluff raised as often, because turn when check like pans like 7s and 8s or king jack, I think don't end up raising as frequently as they might be supposed to, because people realize that they are kind of capped. I think they don't, population might not check turn as protected as they're supposed to. So I also don't think I get bluff raised off my hand as often. So yeah, all these things led me to betting my hand. Do I think it's good? Looking back, I'm not sure. I don't like the decision as much. I think it's significantly better. I think it's slightly better to check, because also hands like 7s and 8s might start bluffing versus the check more often than versus the bet. So there's multiple reasons. I think my hand just has too little equity to bet, blocking also the kind of hands I want to get called from. So yeah, looking back, I think I would check my hand, but those were the reasons why I ended up betting.
So here's the GTO analysis. Again, it's a cutoff versus button, single raise pot. So our hero, Sam Mullur, is out of position against Linus Love on the button, and he rightly recognizes that facing the in-position cold call is a spot where you should check most of the time, and this board in particular is not good for your range. So he just checks everything here correctly. Linus bets 31%, and of course, he calls with ace jack. Now, you could consider raising this hand sometimes, maybe, but a call is more standard in this spot, especially as the covered player. With high risk premium, you generally don't want to go for super thin value. The turn is the 5 of spades. An interesting card. It kind of equalizes the ranges a bit. It completes some flushes. It completes some straight draws. And for that reason, we see cutoff even leading out a little bit. But in game, both players check through, and the river is the queen of hearts, so it's a pretty wet run out. In this spot, Sam went for the block bet with ace jack, which I thought was really interesting. And of course, he just runs into it. Like, Linus just has top 2 here and just has an easy call. But what's interesting is his thought process, because he mentions that he knew this was a little thin, but he goes for it anyway because he thinks that Linus is maybe kind of a calling station, which is wild to me because this is Linus Love we're talking about, one of the most balanced, like, he's known as like the GTO god, right? But a top player like Sam Mullur isn't afraid to like see through that and just be like, actually, I think you're a little bit wide in the spot, Linus. And to his credit, Queen Jack off is not a call. Like, I had to manually put this hand in here. This is not supposed to be in his range at all. So likely Linus's real range is much wider than this. And if his read is correct, then ace jack maybe goes from like a questionable but actually still pretty close block bet to a slam dunk block bet. Not sure. It kind of depends on your range assumptions. Anyway, really interesting hand, well played by both. Let's see the next one.
So for the second spot that I found myself in, we are now 6 players left, and I find myself in the hijack with 35 bigs. The button has the chip lead and I think like still 70 bigs or so, and the big blind is the short stack with 25. And we are second last in chips. I raise 6s. It feels like the threshold combo where I'm not sure if I get to raise 5s. And the button the chip leader calls, which is kind of a likely outcome to happen as he gets to flat quite some hands. So
okay, guys, let's go and find a nice final table solution that matches what was going on. So again, I'm going to select the 200 player ICM final table solutions, and there's 6 players remaining, so we're going to go 6 max. Now, at this point, very first thing I like to do is just type into a spreadsheet like how many big blinds each player has. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to open filters and find a spot where the average stack is about right. So let's say 45 to 55. Okay, and you can see there's still 2,022 solutions, so plenty to choose from. Next, what I'm going to do is set villain's range. So he had 35 big blinds in game, Jake the Rake, but I'm going to just filter from 30 to 40 big blinds. Our hero Sam Mullur on the button with 84 big blinds. So we're the chip lead. I'm just going to go, let's say, at least 70. That's just going to give us spots where we're the chip leader. And then, of course, small blind and big blind, we cover both of them, but they're ahead of hijack. So let's see, small blind has 47, so let's just go like 40 to 60. And big blind had 25 in game, so let's just go 20 to 30. And you can see we've already got 2 great solutions here that really closely match what was happening in game. All right, going on to the solution here, we can see hijack's opening kind of tight, only 19% of hands here. And then on the button here, we have Jake the Rake flatting us, and they're defending pretty wide here, like only folding 77% is like not a whole lot of folding. So as the chip lead, you can defend pretty aggressively, and the other 2 players get out of the way, and we'll take a flop. Now, setting up my tree here, what I'm actually going to do, instead of just retyping all of this, what I can actually do is just open up my save solutions here, and I actually just save the GG Millions as a preset. So I don't need to go and retype it each time. I've already got like the final table prices set. I'm also going to go through and just update the rest of these stacks so that they match what we had in game.
we go to the flop of ace, king, 10 with 2 spades. And right away, compared to the other spot, it's a situation where even though I do have significant risk premium still, in game guessing like 13 to 14% or so, I think that we do have a significant equity and nut advantage here, as I do open raise the obvious strong hands like ace, king, kings, aces, but I also have queen, jack off, most of the time in my opening range, whereas the in-position flatter does not have the offsuit combos at all and just has 4 combos of the nuts in his range. So I think I get to bet the flop quite frequently in game. I just thought it's like more than half the time or so. And I think whenever I do have so many bets, all my hands in range kind of want to bet sometimes. And I also want to bet some of the pairs, and obviously the lower the pair, the nicer or the more benefits I can get from betting, as I get to fold out some of the better pairs and so on, while still having clean outs, which is kind of crucial in this spot. So that's why, like, it's not just having more equity with a spade in case called, it's also that my set outs are clean. So yeah, I decided to bet my hand pure in game. I think we're also playing against the recreational or unknown to me, so I think it does make sense to bet this hand pure in that specific situation. And I ended up betting, and the button decided to call. The turn came a queen of spades, which completes the flush and also puts out a one-liner to the jack. I thought in game that a very bad turn for my range. I think I need to check a significant amount, as the in-position player does have a flush advantage. The ace is also covered from the suit, which doesn't give me all the nut flushes in range, as I also fold some of the suited king x spree. And yeah, I do need to check a lot on that turn. And whenever I need to check like most of the hands in my range, even like I also need to check some of my best bluffs, like for example, in that case, pairs with a suit some of the time. But in this very specific situation, I felt like that this opponent specifically also overfolds the turn quite a bit with all his ace-x combos, which I think he needs to stick around with sometimes, especially if my sizing ends up being small. And also, I think that this specific opponent under-raises flop with some of the two-pair combos and gets to fold them as well. Hands like queen 10, I think, need to raise the flop sometimes. And I think he has way too many of those, which also end up folding perceived without the spade, obviously. So yeah, I expected to generate slightly more folds than I'm supposed to, and therefore decided to bet my hand pure in this very specific situation. But obviously in a spot where my range is supposed to check 90 or even more % of the time, as it's such a bad turn for my range, I don't get to bet any hands pure basically, and even need to check my best bluffing hands at a reasonable frequency. So I would expect this hand to bet just sometimes, in theory, maybe slightly less than half the time or so, as it's such a bad turn. And yeah, but I felt like in game it's a nice play to bet this hand more often, and it ended up working out pretty well, as my opponent decided to flat ace-9 off pre, which I think is too loose of a call. And yeah, he folded and we took down the pot, which was pretty crucial hand. So yeah, very happy with how I played this hand compared to the other one.
Hey guys, you may have noticed that in the official video, we're getting these GTO Wizard recommendations in the overlay. So what's happening here is we've actually partnered with GG Millions to provide solver analysis for their final tables. So we're actually solving these hands like very shortly after they're played live. And then during the live stream, people watching can see the GTO Wizard recommended actions for occasional big hands. We think this is like a really interesting way to watch poker. It kind of like livens up the broadcast so you can see what the solver recommends and see how players are playing instead. Yeah, it's a new age in poker broadcasting. All right, let's do a GTO analysis. So it's another spot where Sam's out of position and he's facing a cold call on the button. The difference is that this time the flop comes ace-king 7, and he's not up against Linus Love, he's up against a recreational player, or at least he doesn't know who this guy is, so he's treating him as a recreational player. So in this case, ace-king 10 is a fantastic card for the hijack. We can see 64% equity right here. So this is the kind of spot where you want to bet a lot of hands. And in game, Sam thought to himself, I want to bet more than half the time. And he knows that low pocket pairs are a pretty good hand to bet with, because if he bets with a hand like sixes, he's folding out like sevens, eights, nines, while getting called by some hands that are potentially a little bit worse than sixes, or like hands that might call once, like for example, let's say king eight, and then fold again to the next turn. So it's a nice play from him. He also notes that, like, as far as combo selection goes, he prefers sixes with his spade as opposed to sixes without a spade. And this isn't because he wants to make a six high flush. Rather, it's because if he turns a river as a six, it does not complete the flush, and therefore you have much higher implied odds. Anyway, the solver agrees with this logic, betting most of the range most of the time. Here the button calls, and we get the queen of spades, a very, very drawish card, and this is terrible for Sam's range. The reason is that it completes every draw. The flushes got there, the straights got there, everything's a two pair. This is just really, really bad for your range. You can see in the ranges breakdown, just comparing like the nut advantage here, the button has more straights, they have more flushes, they have more straight flushes. So when one player is ahead on all of his major nutted hands, the other player usually has to play defensively. Nonetheless, Sam decides to block bet again, and his reasoning was that he thought button would overfold in this spot. And in game, button actually had ace-9 offsuit. Now keep in mind that this is not a GTO flat. He shouldn't have ace-9 offsuit here. This hand should fold pre-flop. I've had to actually just add it in here manually because, well, that's the hand Jake the Rake had in game. And I think in practice, if we can expect that button has like a bunch of like random ace-x hands that just have to go ahead and fold to this bet, maybe it's a reasonable bet, you know? So you can like plug in different ranges and make different assumptions, but in game, it did work. However, in theory, this is not a good lead, technically speaking, because this is not a good card for your range. What we can do, however, is we can use this button to node lock, and we can just force this to overfold. So let's bring that up to, let's say, 30% folds, and let's bring the raising down a lot. So we're going to bring that down to, let's say, 10%. So we're facing like more calls, fewer raises than theory would have you do, and I'm going to go ahead and we're not going to lock the previous nodes. That way hijack can like anticipate this overfold and adjust. And here you can see that once I've started node locking some assumptions, that button's kind of overfolding a bit and like not, aggressively raising us. Now all of a sudden, sixes actually makes perfect sense as a bet, right? Because it's getting all this fold equity. You're folding out like a bunch of better hands. You have like very little equity realization yourself. Like the six-high flush isn't really that valuable in and of itself. So yeah, exploitatively, really nice play from Sam. And he ended up taking down this pot, and it was a big moment for him, turning the tides and eventually leading to a nice second place finish on this final table.
I'm also very happy to be team pro at GTO Wizard now, and I'm looking forward to the future. And much love from Jeju, and see you soon.